Right, people, here we are. Welcome to more James Alcott. I hope you're going to enjoy this. This is a chance for me to have a conversation with you with things that just pop up into my mind. And for those of you have fortunately been following me for some time, you will know that I like to have a conversation with you guys. So this is hopefully an opportunity for me to go and do that. And what I want to kick off with is a video that we're struggling with editors at the moment. So I thought I'd do this video myself on how Leicester will set up under Ruud Van Nistelrooy, have a bit of a conversation here, and from my own selfishness, kind of learn from Leicester City fans, because you know your team better than I do, and I've got some thoughts on how Ruud Van Nistelrooy has, of course, played in the past, but how will it work out for him here? And actually, to be fair, I've probably been a bit harsh on him, and the reason I've been harsh on him is that I feel like, and you can hear this on the ripple effect, David Moyes was the right choice, because I think there's a guarantee in him keeping you up. That said, the more I dive into Ruud Van Nistelrooy's style and look into how he would set up this Leicester City team, actually, do you know what? I think there's some opportunities here. I think January is going to be huge, and there's a player that you might be able to get your hands on, which would be an absolute game changer for you in terms of a profile that you're absolutely missing when it comes to Ruud Van Nistelrooy and how he wants to play. Now, when it comes to Ruud Van Nistelrooy, there's kind of two ways that he played. So first of all, with Ruud Van Nistelrooy, it's a weird one where he's actually sacked after one season where he finished second, scored the most goals, but was kind of thought of as someone who's being maybe, I don't know, a little bit, not regressive, but too direct in how his team's set up. Here are a couple of quotes from Dutch journalists. This is from Marcel van der Kraan, sports editor at De Telegraaf. He said, his style of play is very realistic, not naive. I won't say it was super attacking, but there was venom in the side. So those two are really great starting points for Leicester City fans. It's funny, isn't it? Like, if you had a manager who was outrageously gung-ho, you wouldn't want that, would you? The one thing that I do worry about is a final quote that, I tell you what, let's not spoil it just yet. Let's go through this team. And actually, maybe let's kick off with the team that when he played Rangers in the qualifiers for the Champions League. Because there's a 4-3-3 here, and there's a 4-4-2 that might work. Let's have a look at, let's just give you a bit of a taster of the setup here, because this is with Gakpo, of course. And obviously he did well with Gakpo, and he's spoken about how losing someone like Gakpo was such a huge loss for him and probably led to him losing his job. But this is the setup here, and what's important to touch on is the midfield three, which is really interesting. Let me show you how this looks kind of on paper and start to build out a Leicester City team and how it might play out, because actually there's another formation that I think is quite important here in terms of how I think Ruud might give it a go. So Hermansen, I think, will absolutely be in goal. Now, when it comes to the defence, the midfield's a really interesting area, but the defence, I think he will stick with what's kind of worked for him at PSV. And the idea is that you have a player that tucks in. So with PSV, it was on the left-hand side. It was much more important that the left-hand side had that option, because you wanted to get someone like Gakpo on it. And it was someone like Jordan Teze, who was the right back, who would end up tucking in. And I think a similar thing would happen right here. Because I think James Justin, so there's a couple of profiles that don't really work. Now, one thing, I think if you had Thomas Castagne still in the team, I think you'd be in a much better shape. And maybe if someone like Pereira, that might also help. That said, Pereira is over on this right-hand side, and I think this area here is going to be really crucial to kind of almost recreate the sort of Gakpo style of play a little bit, with a bit of a twist. So I think it would be quite a tight three. This is what he generally likes to do. He likes to have one of the back four sort of tucking in that little bit. So in terms of that attacking player on the left-hand side as a wing-back, I think it could be Luke Thomas. That is the player that's able to bomb up just that little bit more than James Justin, who I think is absolutely comfortable in sort of tucking in a little bit for the team. Now, the midfield three is really, really interesting because, first of all, in terms of the goalkeeper, what he likes to do is he does want to play to his two centre-backs. He does want to play from there, and he does want to get the ball to his midfielders as well. But constantly, they are happy to be direct at times to get the ball in behind. Something that Ruud Van Nistelrooy really not adverse to at all. And the midfield's an interesting one where it does something that you wouldn't really expect. But in someone like Buonanotte, he could be a useful tool for them. But what they generally do is they have quite a flat back three. So let me show you the back three from that game again. So Joey Veerman, bit more of a playmaker, right? And then Sangare and Gutierrez, quite physical, flat midfield three that they would play with. So this is where I was kind of like, this section of it, I actually quite like for Leicester City. I do. Because I think in terms of the personnel that you've got, and let's chuck them all out here firstly. I think in terms of the personnel that you've got, someone like, let me get Chowdhury out. Chowdhury, is he still there, Chowdhury? I think he is. Sumari. You've got players like Winks, of course. You've got players like Ndidi, of course. You've got those kind of midfielders that I kind of want to stay in that straight line. You know, there isn't too much to them. And actually, I think it's one where Ndidi kind of bombing on is just not something that's totally worked. And there is a sort of method to the madness. Now, the top three, I think, here, if you can get them all fit and playing well, is your Veerman, is Winks. I think Skip could probably drop in and do that as well. But he's a great sort of shuttler as a midfielder as well. And then Ndidi, maybe on this side, being that slightly more defensive midfielder to give sort of a bit more freedom to that other side as it shifts across. But also have a little bit of freedom on occasion to step in front. Now, that back line is pretty straightforward. And again, the reason for this lack of kind of, you know, having your normal midfield three, a bit more like this, is to have a bit of safeguarding. But what's really interesting is when you bring in those wide players. Now, first of all, when it comes to PSV, they like to have those players sort of high and wide, getting involved, but like looking to get in behind them as well. I'm going to bring in the players here. Now, centre forward is a bit of a conundrum for me. But there's a player here that's going to be absolutely crucial. Absolutely crucial to what you guys want to do. And his name is Mavididi. I think he's absolutely huge. Because if you think about Gakpo and what he's able to get out of Ruud Van Nistelrooy and what he was able to get out of Gakpo, having that player that can play out wide and drive into this space here, I think is going to be really important. Let me explain exactly why. Now, let's bring Vardy in just to kick us off. I'm not totally sure if Vardy is the answer, and there's a problem in profile here when we think about it. But in terms of front, that three that we're sort of aware of from the Rangers game with PSV, this is where I think it will be a little bit different. We got to remember Xavi Simons played for PSV as well, and he's a bit more of a Buonanotte type of player. And I feel like Buonanotte might be the answer here, especially when you've got someone like Vardy, kind of like AU. Let's take this off him. Kind of like Daka. You know, kind of like De Cordova-Reid. When we're talking about the striker, kind of like Edouard, these aren't target men. And this is probably the biggest problem that Ruud Van Nistelrooy has, is that when he was playing when he's managing for PSV, he had that target man, and then he had those kind of runners in behind. So how do you work that out? So what I think you do, if we take some of these guys out, I think what they'll look to do is they'll lean on Vardy. Because why would you not lean on Vardy? He's always been great for them. I think he'll hold up the ball to a point. You know, he's a little rat, isn't he? But he still wants to kind of make that run in behind as well. But someone like Buonanotte, when Xavi Simons played, he did offer that opportunity to come into these areas here. And he's very competent in those areas as well. So what I think we will see is Mavididi holding that width. Vardy as that striker and looking to get him to hold up the ball as best as he can. But with Buonanotte, it might be one where he kind of starts in a position further wide. And what we saw a lot with Ruud Van Nistelrooy is that these players would stay high and wide. But when the ball was then played to them, often by the likes of Veerman, is that actually that player would dribble back with them maybe. And what that would do is it would lead to the opposition feeling like that's almost a pressing trigger. So it would bring a lot of players towards the ball. And once that happened, there then was this lovely bit of space here that you could just pop the ball into and be that little bit more direct. That's what Ruud Van Nistelrooy would like to do. And I think Buonanotto's, you know, a little bit, he's obviously a different kind of profile to the players that they've had, which are a bit more like Mavididi, like Fatu is. Shame he's not available. But having someone with his quality on the ball, it allows for Vardy then, let's say he's able to pick up the ball here, suck in some players, and then it allows for Mavididi to make that run. But also, actually, maybe Vardy to make a run here, Vardy to make a run here as well. And you're still kind of getting in behind the opposition. I think this is the way that he's going to look to play. You can't not play Buonanotte. It would be ridiculous not to. So I feel like he's got a huge, huge part to play. I do worry about the strikers. I feel like having an out-and-out centre-forward would help, but at the same time, you've got to try and get Buonanotte in this team as well. So I could see that midfield three. And again, when you think of the profiles that brought into the club, it is a bit of a mismatch. It is a bit of a problem. So to have a bit more of a solid 2 sets of 3 with that defensive stability there, I think might give them a much better opportunity to stay in games, but also utilise the attacking threats that they have. Because if Vardy can't finish a game, De Cordova can work and do a job, or if Buonanotte's not really doing it, or if you want to go and play a 2 as well, you maybe take one of these guys out. You'd be that little bit braver. Bring Vardy, bring De Cordova here, and you can kind of, and it's Maresca to a point, but generally they like to have this player here, and they might want to do that as well. Maybe bring Winks here and Didi over on this side. Buonanotte sort of steps in here, but he has that ability to move forward as well. Edouard, Daka, Ayew, might be solid soldiers for the team. But what I think 2 things need to happen for Leicester to survive. And actually, what I will say is I believe in this just a little bit more than I did initially. And it's nothing against Ruud Van Nistelrooy. It's just the experience of David Moyes. I think if you can go and get David Moyes just to safeguard you and stay in the league, which we speak about in the ripple effect, that seems like an absolute no-brainer for me. 2 things I want to say though, and this is always the thing with the teams down the bottom, is this is really interesting. So this is, make sure I'm on the right one. So this is the sort of most used 11 this season from Leicester City when you're trailing. Sorry, when you're not trailing in a game. Okay, so just to maybe let's put some lines in there, or make a little box out of it. See if this works. Might not work. No, it won't. Okay, don't worry. But you can see it. Should we change the colour? Let's change the colour, shall we? Let's get a different colour. Here we go. Look where the box is. Now this is when you are trailing Leicester City. Look how much higher you are. And also in terms of the passing stats as well. When the passing stats in terms of the zones that you're playing in, you're never, ever really passing into these areas here when you're in a game. It's only once you're losing that you kind of start to play those passes and you're brave enough to do it. When you're in a game, you're just playing the ball into these zones here. The point being, look like a little monster, didn't it? The point being is that it's an attitude as well. It feels like when you're not losing, you're waiting to lose. And I understand that look, it's game state. That's often the case where, you aren't kind of as positive because you're not losing yet. That's great. And maybe the opposition aren't working as hard as well. But there's a frightened nature to this Leicester City team right now. And this might sound negative, but I actually think the best way for Leicester City to stay in this division is to be solid, use the players and the profiles that you've got right now. And when you look at that midfield, that's what I see. And actually, I think the way of going with Ruud Van Nistelrooy, I like so much more than I did. There's one player that I think you should go out and get in January. I think it would be absolutely fantastic for you. And it could be a bit of a game changer for you as well if you were able to do it. Let's just set up how I think you should set up. Oh, chaos, isn't it? I think this just gives you a bit more solidity. I think a lot of the time there are these massive spaces here, by the way. So just be that bit more solid. Like stay in the game in a different way. Because I think you're caught between trying to play and understanding what you are right now, which is a team that needs to stay in games, needs to utilise the pace that you've got in behind and the quality in those transitions of someone like Buonanotte. And I feel like that's the answer for him. But the big change that will be really interesting is if you can go and get yourself Evan Ferguson as an option. Apparently he's going to be available on loan. Let me know how you feel about that, Leicester City fans and Brighton fans if you're watching this one. If you enjoyed this one, you want more James Alcott, then I'm here. We're just going to have simple chats. Let me know how you feel about this setup and the way that Ruud Van Nistelrooy will most likely set up with Leicester City and if they will stay in the league. And go and check out all the content that is on the channel and, of course, subscribe as well.